If you've been following Elmo in the news lately, you know that his social media has been experiencing a dumpster fire of hacker events. And speaking of dumpster fires, we're going to be talking about the defunding of PBS, NPR that just passed in the House. And we're also going to be talking about this liberal belief that has infiltrated conservative culture and has actually been happening for a long time in various different ways. And we're going to be uncovering some of that today, talking about Elon Musk and his crazy new announcement. So y'all stick around, and Ryan's going to walk us through this, and we're going to have a good discussion.
All right. Well, Troy, thanks for joining us on this Friday. It is a great way to get our weekend started here, always talking about dumpster fires and the radical left and how we need to get rid of it. So first up, I'm excited to share. I've actually got the wrong, let me get the right article here, but there is an article I had, but it was it was supposed to be, I must have got rid of. Oh, here it is.
That PBS one. Yep.
Here's a PBS article reporting on the House giving its final approval to cut funding to PBS. So I like that. Go ahead and see PBS reporting on the cutting of their own funding. So this actually went through the Senate just this week and went through the House early this morning or late last night. And so this is actually going back to the president to have that signed. So that should be signed in office today. In fact, if it wasn't done by today, then that money would have went to PBS. And so this was a very timely thing that came right down to the last minute. And this cuts, let's see here. It cuts $1.1 billion in funding to CBP, which is the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And so that really gives the money to PBS and NPR. And so it also cuts around $8 million in federal foreign aid as well. And so this actually goes through, just needed a simple majority vote. And so it went through, it passed, and it's done. So Trump needs to sign that today. It passed narrowly. It was 51-48 in the Senate, and in the House, it just passed by a few votes as well. And so there was two Republicans that joined the Democrats in not voting for it. And so, they had several months ago hearings talking about the bias that was happening there. And the CEO or the leader of, I'm trying to get her name now, but the leader of PBS really had negative Trump remarks from the past. And she also gave some excuses for some of the different things that they were doing and said, yeah, it was a mistake. We didn't report on the Hunter Biden laptop. And, they just happened to align with the left on just about everything, and I think they showed there was an independent review that was done that showed that their coverage of the Democratic National Convention was like 88% positive, and of the Republican National Convention, it was like 77% negative. So, I mean, it's like, you can't really argue bias. If it was around 50s or 60s, you might be able to argue bias, but can't argue that. So the point here is that this has been snuck in. And like you said, this is the dumpster fire of what's been happening. And so we need to really pay attention to this. And I think, especially during COVID, it all came for all of us to see what kids were getting in school, and all these agendas and corporations came not far behind that. And that all got exposed, and people just blew up about it. And praise God, people came to their senses. Well, maybe not, but at least we got rid of it out of the public eye. And this is sort of seems like the next phase in that. And so just to be fair, the other side, they're saying, well, we don't need public broadcasting anymore. It's 2025. People have internet, people have all this other stuff. And there were a few people like representatives from like Alaska saying, oh, we need it. And because it's remote and rural, and okay, there may be a case for that, but that's really using the exception to make the rule. And so that's not really the justification that should be used. So I want to,
I agree with that. I agree with that, Ryan. Like my heart goes out to people in rural areas that are going to be affected. But the problem is, what are we feeding them in the first place? What are we feeding their families? What are we feeding their kids? It's like, that is the problem. I would be all for, a lot of people have seen the Mr. Rogers, testimony before Congress saying we need public broadcasting for these reasons, and it's like, and I agree with that side of things. I would be all for it if it were better and if it weren't so left leaning in its ideology, it's like, but since that's the case, we have to scrap it. If you want to build back up, and do something that's maybe unbiased or a little more family friendly, that would be great.
Yeah, if it would actually fulfill its original purpose. And I know what they do is they say, okay, this is about education. This is about helping kids. This is about social emotional regulation, learning, all those sorts of things, which my wife and I have a Schoolhouse Academy and a daycare and all kinds of things. And I've been doing grant funding for early childhood education programs. So I'm a little familiar with some of this stuff. And really, you can't have a screen teach all of these things to a kid. That needs to be a supplement or something that's done with an adult. So that argument by itself is a little bit weak. And so there's a lot more to say about that and unpack that. But I think we need to go to our next part of the story here. And I think you've got something for us on Elon. Is that where you want to go to next?
Yeah. So Elon Musk recently announced this. I'm going to use some language here. So if you have kids in the room, just be aware that they might not want to listen to this part, but I'm going to try to keep my language unsalty if I can. He just announced this new bot, which is like essentially a girlfriend bot. So it's an AI friend that you have that has been sexualized, and there's things that you can ask the bot to do that you shouldn't be able to ask a bot to do, right? And so that is it's very, very controversial for one thing, but it's also showing, I believe, a problem with the conservative culture, something that we've not really put our finger on yet. We've not really fully realized. Some of us have, obviously, a lot of people have, but and the problem is, a lot of times we'll draw somebody in and call them our own, say, oh, you're one of us now, like a lot of people did for Musk last year when he jumped on Trump's campaign, and kind of helped to fund that, right? And we said, yay, Musk is one of us, awesome. But the problem is we don't realize there's a big distinction between being fiscally conservative and socially conservative, right? There's a big difference. So he's very fiscally conservative. I mean, he's wealthy, he owns businesses, he understands how the economy works, he understands you've got to make it to where businesses can thrive so that the people can thrive, right? So he understands all of that. He understands that side of politics, and he goes for that. But at the same time, he's very socially liberal. If you look at his relationships, the way that his family is kind of set up, it's very strange. The things that he's into, all these different things. And so it makes sense that he would announce like, hey, I've got, if you need a girlfriend, like I've got this, and they're about to come out with the male version of it too, or whatever. But it's like, I've got this, and it's based off of 50 Shades of Grey, unfortunately, the male version. So it's like, it's just very dark stuff. It's very, very dark stuff. And it's unfortunately available to not just the adult users on the platform, but it's available to the kid, the accounts as well. It doesn't matter what age, like it's available, and it's through his Grok thing or whatever, which makes me a lot less happy about Grok in general. But it's this idea of we go, yay, we swallow the pill whole without realizing, like, wait a minute, I need to be very aware of where this person is, not just with their politics, in this one area, but also where are they in their spirituality? Where are they in their values? What do they value? What are their beliefs? What are their core beliefs? And it's like, that's very different when you look at Elon Musk. So he's very much like, the crazy thing about it is like he promotes like having kids, right? Because he says, hey, we're depopulating in a lot of major nations right now. Japan is shrinking. The United States is on the edge of starting to shrink, right? Like our population is starting to shrink, and we're going to die off if that keeps going at the same rate and increases. Like, and he's looking at the long-term problem, but he's having kids with a whole bunch of different women, and he's not promoting positive, healthy lifestyles when it comes to family values and the family unit, and so what he's doing is he's preaching one thing, but then he's doing it in a way that's not effective, and it's not good, for the kids, not good for the family. It's not really good for the culture. And we see that. We're going to get into a few of those stats here today. But yeah, it's all tied back to, if y'all don't know, PBS, they just got defunded. They were the Sesame Street, producers. They produced Sesame Street, and Sesame Street ran on there for years.
Good,
and years.
wholesome. Yeah.
So that's why we got
family
Elmo,
stuff.
the dumpster fire Elmo up. That's why we got all this stuff. It's like Bert and Ernie on the thumbnail. It's like, because all these characters that, a lot of people for a long time love, their beloved characters, have been kind of like used to infiltrate the Christian families for one, but also just like the conservative family and the family values. And it's like, it's kind of wound up in a place that we never wanted to go. So what are your thoughts, Ryan?
Yeah. So I think this is sort of what happens. Like, I knew, like, first thing that came to my mind is, I mean, if you haven't been following Elon Musk, I suppose maybe it's understandable that somebody would embrace and just really not think about it. But if you know anything about Elon Musk, you should know, like, yeah, okay, he's supporting this, but he didn't jump out of his boat into our boat and understand this. And so this really makes it makes no sense. It's ludicrous. I think that, the having kids with many women, and like Andrew Tate has the same justification, like, oh, you got to have an empire and you got to have, and it's kind of like, you guys are just using this as an excuse to live the lifestyle you want to live. Like, stop pretending like you're doing something for society. It's ridiculous and it's pathetic. And it's like the government saying, well, don't you care about kids? We need to give money to all these families. And I would say, I agree. You should give money to families, but there should be some stipulations on that. Do you know what stipulations they made when they started this welfare state? Was they said, look, we're going to give money to every woman who has this child, but there's one requirement. You can't have a man in the home. In other words, if you want this money, so it's incentivizing single parenthood. And that's why certain populations now are around 70% of that individual child, and from that ethnic group, is born in a single family home or single parent household. And so that destroys the family. And sadly, there are some that know that the family is the background of society, and therefore they want to destroy it. And so for me, that's just saying, like, okay, yeah, they solve one problem, but they create 5 more that have bigger long-term effects. And so it's the same thing with this, where we say, yeah, this is great, we want to support that. And then all of a sudden you see this other thing come in very drastically outside the value system. And so now everybody has to backtrack a little bit, but that's fine. Call yourself out on it and then go forward in the right direction. So I think that, this is just the next step in the chain, and we need to be standing strong and be clear about what we are standing for and not standing for.
I agree. So we've got just a couple stats that Doug pulled up here, and this is a study that was done. Do you want to go through that, Ryan? Because I think this is critical when it comes to understanding. Well, so we've got Christians that watch this channel. We've got non-Christians that watch this channel. Probably more conservative people watch this channel. Maybe a few from the left that are curious about what we're saying or whatever. But this idea of traditional values, this idea of the traditional family, like, does it really hold up in court when you look at the stats, when you look at the data, when you look at the studies that have been done? Because you can talk all day long and somebody can argue against that and say, well, you all are just being moralists. Like, we have our morals, you have your morals. And it's like, but at the end of the day, it's not just a moral value. It's a proven fact that it just works better. Like, it's like, you just look at the data, it just works better. It's better for the kids, better for the culture, better for the communities. So do you want to read some of those, Ryan?
Let's run through this. So I just wanted to show this article here. This from Fox News, talking about PBS, pushing propaganda and those sorts of things. And it's the same thing that Elon's doing. There's different propaganda. I want to say that when people talk about, well, you can't force your morality, it's like, look, all laws enforce morality. The question is, whose morality? Okay, so whose morality is not murdering people? Like, whose morality is that? Are you saying that's the atheist doesn't agree with that? Well, it's whose morality are we going to make into law? And that's the question. Mm-hmm. And so let's look at this. If you can argue based just on saying, hey, we just want to do what's best for society. Therefore, we should be promoting family structure, socioeconomic status, and mental health. All of these have effects on childhood. And so this study that was done, it says children from single parent families exhibited worse mental health outcomes than those from traditional families. Now, I will say this, traditional families being a mother and a father. I will say this, I've seen lots of data on this. There, of course, are exceptions. There are people that I know from single parent households that and that are doing very well. And there's no problem. Mm-hmm. They overcome a lot. And it's just incredible what many mothers and fathers in single parent households can do. And so I want to give a shout out to them who are really making it happen and doing best. And one thing that I've seen, I've been a mentor to 10-year-old boys who did not have a father in the home, and for different reasons. And what I learned is that just having a mentor in a child's life makes a huge difference. Just having a reliable, stable adult relationship with a reliable adult is it. That can make a huge difference in a child's life. And I can go into lots of details about that, but the point is the same. And so we had another study here that says so this is the impact of family structure on health of children and the effects of divorce. So it says nearly 3 decades of research evaluating the impact of family structure on the health and well-being of children demonstrates that children living with their married biological parents consistently have better physical, emotional, and academic well-being. And so even if it's a non-perfect family or a non-perfect parent-child relationships, the stability, having that intact, is more beneficial in the long term than having some of those other variables removed at the same time having the parents not together in the same household. And so,
Yeah, and obviously,
any way you slice it, it's the same
every
conclusion.
story can be redeemed, like, and there's heroes born every day, who are single parents, that raise their kids and do the best they can, and there's a really, really good outcome. There's a really positive outcome, and it's like, and I would take my hat off to them, and that's a very difficult thing to do. So I don't want to diminish that either, but at the same time, when you look at the data as a whole, it's what does the data show is best for, and I would say not even apply it to the individual so much, but just apply it to society and the laws that we create to help those. We should be helping single parents. We should be helping single mothers. Absolutely. But we should also be taking into consideration what is the best environment for a child, and we should be helping that to thrive as well, right? Helping, it's like if there's no option, we need to be there to help. But at the same time, if there is an option and if there is an alternative, then it's like, how do we promote what's best for the actual kids in the long run?
Yeah, and I think what it comes down to is, what is the public policy? What should the government? We're not talking about whether we should help single mothers. Right. We're talking about whether the government has a compelling interest to incentivize single parent households. That's what we're talking about. And by incentivize, I mean create incentives for them to have children outside of wedlock, which is not what's good for society and creates all kinds of other issues on the higher scale. Again, this is not to be a demeaning or insulting anything for single parent households or anything, but and like I said, like we've said, I know people, and I've got this. This is not ragging on single parent households. This is ragging on what the government is incentivizing. That's my issue. And so Josh Hawley, he's a representative he's not a representative, a senator from Missouri, and he's talked about having pro-family legislation. And I agree with this. Like Trump has talked about this. If I was going to run for office, I'm going to make this proposal right now, is that we actually should incentivize and give money to parents, households that are intact, that have both the mother and the father together, and give money for each child. And then, hey, 7 years later, they're still together, more money for that. And so that would be incentivizing what we want. And so we can go through all the economics of it and why that would make sense and how we would do that. But it's incentivizing the right behavior. And you know what? When you have that incentivized, it takes care of other issues that show up 20 years later, like the incarceration rates, like the crime rates, all those kinds of things line up with not having intact families. There's all kinds of statistics that support all of that. And so that's really where public policy should be going, not incentivizing not incentivizing the opposite of that.
I want to pull something up that's interesting, because what we're looking at across the board. We're looking at people like Elon Musk that have their hand in governmental affairs, obviously not necessarily a politician, but involved, and him pushing his socially liberal beliefs, on his influencers or his followers as an influencer. Then we've got the government involved in your family's life with your kids. Like you mentioned earlier, 2020, I think a lot of parents in 2020 kind of woke up to what their kids were watching, because they were at home working and they could hear their kids watching the stuff in the other room or whatever. And they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that that PBS was running this kind of stuff or whatever. It's like we've got the government interfering with the young kids. But we also have the government interfering with especially that age where a child becomes an adult, right? An adolescent becomes a young adult, and that's that college age, not. All right, I just jumped back on. Can y'all see me?
Yes, I'm good. I don't know. I thought it was mine. Maybe it wasn't.
I think it was me.
Okay.
Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. There's an article that came out in 2016 from the Imaginative Conservative, and it's called "How the Federal Government Promotes the Hookup Culture." And so what we've actually seen is we've seen legislation from the government that's been directly tied to the hookup culture being promoted among young adults, especially starting on college campuses and then spreading from there. So this was actually Title IX, and many people are familiar with this. It's the section of the Civil Rights Act that bars discrimination on the basis of sex. But with that, obviously there's some good there, that people should not be discriminated against, whether they're a male or a female. They should be given equal opportunity based on their merit, all that kind of stuff, right? There's some good there, but there's also a lot of other weird things mixed in. Okay. But one of the things they mixed in to this was they essentially promoted this agenda to gain power over the sex lives of college students. So for what happened was there was a sexual revolution in the 60s. And also around that same time, the government decided, hey, we're going to help fund more college education. And so whoever holds the purse strings pulls the strings, right? It's like they pull the strings because they hold the purse, right? So instead of parents funding their child's education as much, and same thing's happening in public schools, obviously, and even private schools to an extent, even private universities to an extent. But it's like, well, we're going to fund it, but also we're going to require, with the funding comes this requirement of you got to teach this thing, right? And this started to occur on the college campuses, and then it spread from there to the high schools. It spread to the elementary. Now we're winding up with this weird, agenda that's being taught in the schools, and it's like, well, you have to go through this because it's public education, right? But it started with this idea of promoting hookup culture. And essentially, they were dehumanizing these students, and they were creating this weird set of norms that put this at a pivotal moment of people's maturing this age where they mature into an adulthood. They warped their psyche. Essentially, they warped their psyche and made it to where, hey, even if you were raised with family values, we pushed so hard and we took the lid off so much that you experienced something that flipped the script in your college days. And I'm not going to go into all the details or whatever, because of the environment that we created through our legislation. And guess what? Now we made it to where you can never go back to those family values, because you're like, oh, well, now I guess I'm just this type of person or whatever. It's like this was programming. This was on purpose. And I'm just going to say, as a Christian, I say, I'm so grateful for the grace of God, his ability to forgive us, redeem us, and change us. Because it's like, without that, man, we're all messed up, right? It's like, there's not one of us that's done this right. But at the same time, they were normalizing the hookup culture. And this was not just the college students that were starting it. No, it was a government normalization that was happening. So I'm going to read part of this. For some years, there was a vacuum. This is from the Imaginative Conservative. For some years, there was a vacuum. Nobody was in charge of the dormitories. The dormitories were akin to the island of in The Lord of the Flies. But the university, like nature, hates a vacuum. It was too much to ask once they gave up their proper role in putting the brakes on adolescent hormones for university administrators to hold off on proselytizing for the new morality. And so we began to have contraceptive giveaways and counseling sessions aimed at helping students partake of the most open and experimental aspects of the new orthodoxy. The result was the hookup culture. So this was not it's just the way the culture went, so much as it was the federal government. The federal government was speeding up this process. And obviously, the culture is going to get darker in a lot of ways, but at the same time, they were like, hey, if we put these systems in place, it's going to speed up the process. And then what happens is people they fall into the river, they get caught in the current. And by the time they get out of the university, they're a changed person, and they don't agree with their parents' beliefs anymore. They don't agree. It's like something has happened to where this is the result. Not surprisingly, this culture has turned out to be harmful and even oppressive. And that's not just then, that's now. If you look at the stats that are involved with the hookup culture, the apps that they have available, all these things, the statistics show and the data shows these cultures are harmful and oppressive. Young people end up engaging in activities they later regret. That's the data shows they regret the activities. And then also predators use this culture as an opportunity to take advantage of people. So it's a terrible, terrible situation, and it's like, if the government was promoting the best version of the family, instead of promoting this hookup culture, instead of promoting some of these other things, we'd be in a lot better place as a society than we are now, but it's there, and we need to realize it. Like, we need to not turn a blind eye to what has been happening for a long time, for 50 plus years, and is still happening. And there's a lot of people that would love to get this kind of legislation passed in a lot more areas, in a lot more places in life. And we just need to be aware of it. We need to stand up for the truth. We need to stand up for what's right.
Yeah, that's right. I think being aware of the tactics that are being used and what's really happening, I think we have for too long given the benefit of the doubt to the people in these positions that we think they're representing our interests and what's best for us and our families and the culture. And it turns out not at all. In fact, it's really gone the opposite direction from what it should be going. And so, but the thing is, we can take that back into our own hands for our own for ourselves, for our own children, for our own families, for our neighbors, for our communities. We can stand up and do that and make a difference on a local level. And so starting with our own children. And so that is something that if people are going to send their kids out to a public university or a public school, like, they need to be prepared. There needs to be a significant amount of time invested in undoing the government programming that's coming from some of these things that you've even mentioned, and being prepared to answer those things. I mean, we see people, kids, when they get out of youth groups and all these sorts of things, a vast majority of them leave. Now, I've got other criticisms of youth groups, but that's because the youth group wasn't really ever supposed to be serving that purpose. It's the family that was supposed to be serving that purpose. And even having the youth group put in place that was designed after a secular other Sunday thing, but that is something that is the same thing. When families don't take matters into their own hands and don't manage things the way that God created and designed, over governing their own family, then these sorts of things happen. And kids that aren't prepared and they go off into these different situations and environments, then they're susceptible to this. And so, like you said, if we're aware of this, we can prepare ourselves, stay abreast on what is going on currently, and be prepared, and also prepare those around us and our children, especially because they're the most vulnerable. And that is who the enemy wants to go after and attack and steal, because they are the future. And that's why it's so important that we are really investing in our children, in our future, and doing what we need to do from an individual perspective, and also pushing our elected representatives to do the same.
Amen.
What do you think?
I agree with you, Ryan. I agree with you. Again, I can't stress enough just the grace aspect of it. You know, like, as a Christian, I know we don't have all Christians that watch this channel, but as a Christian, the side of things, you know, that says it's gotten too dark, you've gone too deep, you're too far away, you're too far, whatever it is like, it's not too late. It's not too late. God can turn things on their head. God can redeem. And I'm so grateful for that. And for who Jesus is and who he's been in my life. Because it's like, without Jesus, I would be a very different person. But at the same time, yeah, we do need to be proactive in pushing for legislation, pushing for the politicians, pushing for all these things that are going to actually hold up these family values. And unfortunately, I have to part ways with Elon Musk significantly on this issue, and am going to be speaking against it. You know, even if I like some of the things he's done over the last year, with this, I'm like, nope, completely dropped the ball. Not going to support this at all. And, you know, and going to be very outspoken against it. So, well, yeah, any last thoughts, Ryan?
Yeah, I think to kind of mark off where I'm at, I think there's only about one or two things on Elon Musk's agendas that I support, which we've already talked about. And I think it's very clear what those are, the conservative things. Everything else, pretty much, he's got a different agenda or something else that he's doing that it's actually tied to. That's the real agenda for a reason for developing those sorts of things. And so, yeah, but we need to be critical thinkers. We need to be thinking for ourselves no matter what. And that's whether it's coming out of Donald Trump's mouth or whether it's coming out of Elon Musk's mouth or Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens or Megyn Kelly or anybody in between or outside of that. We need to be thinking for ourselves, and we need to have all that that we are going through and looking at the details. And it doesn't take a lot of time. You just got to actually think for yourself and actually look at the facts. So anything else from you, Troy?
I agree. Stand on your principles, stand on your values. And that's going to be the best place to stand. So that's it. I hope y'all enjoyed that. Hope y'all have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see y'all next time.
God bless.